Hello there. Welcome back to Soft-Spoken Mythology, where the gods are loud, but we speak softly. If you've been here before, you know the drill. Comfy blanket, dim lighting, maybe a warm beverage if you're feeling decadent. Tonight, we'll be drifting gently through the myths and messes of a god who is, perhaps, the least subtle in the entire Greek pantheon. Ares, the god of war, rage, battle lust, and the occasional dramatic pout. He is not a strategist like Athena. He's not beloved like Apollo, or crafty like Hermes, or powerful like Zeus. No, Ares is different, loud, brash, blood-stained, and very, very tired of being misunderstood. And if you've ever been the black sheep at a family reunion, you might just understand him better than you think. Tonight, we're going to get to know this much maligned war god in a way that might surprise you. We'll look past the clanging armor and the battlefield screams and ask, who was Ares, really? What does it mean to be the god of unrestrained conflict in a society that valued control and honor above all else? We'll explore his dramatic love life. Yes, of course Aphrodite is involved. And yes, there's a magic net and public shaming. But there's more to it than that. There are children with names like Panic and Terror. There are Amazons and courtroom trials and petty divine brawls that feel suspiciously like family dinners gone wrong. Ares is not just a war god. He is emotion, raw and unrefined. He's fury, jealousy, desire, frustration. He's the scream you bottle up in traffic, the heat in your chest when something feels unfair, the moment right before a fight, even if it's with yourself. And so, while we'll of course be exploring myths, with all the usual immortal chaos and bad decision-making you've come to expect, we'll also be uncovering something gentler beneath the violence. Ares, in all his intensity, might just be the most human of the gods. Now, before we begin, if you enjoy soft-spoken deep dives into mythology, or you just like falling asleep to tales of divine drama, feel free to subscribe. Give this video a sleepy thumbs up, or leave a comment telling me which mythological figure you'd like to snooze to next. Tonight's journey will be long, winding, and full of battle cries you won't actually hear. So settle in, breathe deep, let the noise of the day melt away, like the clatter of swords forgotten on a quiet battlefield. And when you're ready, we'll meet Ares, the god of war, the god of fury, the god who just wanted someone to understand him, or at least stop comparing him to his sister. Now that we're settled and the mortal world has faded into the background, let's begin, not on the battlefield, but in the clouds, in the shimmering halls of Olympus, where ambrosia flows, drama unfolds hourly, and even the family pets are probably immortal. A child was born. His name was Ares, and his destiny, it seemed, was to be the god of war. He was the son of Zeus, king of the gods, and Hera, queen of the gods. A divine power couple, if there ever was one, though not exactly known for their nurturing parenting style. Zeus, with his wandering attention and thundering ego, and Hera, sharp-eyed and sharp-tongued, rarely saw eye to eye on anything, except maybe that their son, Ares, was kind of a handful. Unlike his half-sister, Athena, goddess of wisdom, war strategy, and chill logic, Ares embodied the raw, unfiltered side of war. He didn't scheme, he didn't outthink, he charged. He was the raw before the sword was drawn, the dust rising from the boots of 10,000 soldiers, the fear, the adrenaline, the chaos. And because of that, he was never really loved. Not by the Greeks, anyway. In fact, in most ancient texts, Ares is treated more like an inconvenient force of nature than a noble deity. Hesiod calls him a curse to men. Homer, in the Iliad, refers to him as the most hateful of the gods. Even Zeus, his own father, basically says, "I would have left you at the divine orphanage if I could." Ouch. You see, the Greeks valued order, even in war. That's why they adored Athena, goddess of calculated tactics, defensive maneuvers, and warfare as a necessary evil in the service of justice. Ares, on the other hand, represented passion without purpose, violence for its own sake. He was the god who showed up not when justice needed defending, but when tempers boiled over. He was the war no one wanted but couldn't avoid. Civil war, betrayal, blood feuds. All of those fell under Ares' chaotic umbrella. It didn't help that he and Athena were near opposites. Where Athena plotted, Ares lunged. Where she waited and observed, he rushed in swinging. Athena was the sniper, silent, deliberate, effective. Ares was the berserker, loud, intense, and usually covered in someone else's blood. The Greeks may have feared him, but they rarely honored him. In many cities, he had no major temples. His worshippers were few. He was, in a strange way, the god of war who no one really wanted around until it was too late. And perhaps that is part of what makes him so fascinating. But Ares didn't roam the battlefield alone. No, he traveled with his children. Two of the most famous were Phobos and Deimos. Their names literally mean fear and terror. These twin sons would accompany their father into battle, sowing chaos wherever they went. They weren't metaphors. They were actual divine entities who galloped alongside Ares in his chariot, spreading dread across the mortal world. Also in his blood-soaked entourage, Eris, the goddess of strife, and Enyo, the goddess of war and destruction. With a team like that, it's no wonder poets described him less like a god and more like a walking battlefield. Can you imagine that? The clash of armor, the neighing of celestial horses, the sky blackened by the storm clouds of war. And in the center, Ares, sword drawn, eyes blazing, not thinking, just feeling. There's something very human about that, and maybe that's why the other gods couldn't stand him. On Olympus, Ares didn't exactly have friends. While gods like Apollo threw parties, and Hermes told jokes, and Athena ran wisdom seminars or whatever she did on the weekends, Ares brooded. He was often humiliated, tricked, beaten. In the Iliad, he's actually wounded by a mortal, Diomedes, with a little help from Athena, of course. Ares flees the battlefield crying, literally weeping, and complaining to Zeus that it's not fair. His father replies with something like, "Stop whining. I never liked you anyway." It's not great parenting. Ares, then, occupies a strange space. He's powerful, yes, a literal god, but he's also vulnerable. He doesn't win many battles. He's not a clever god. He doesn't do schemes or riddles or shape-shifting swan tricks. He shows up, gets angry, and hits things. And sometimes, he loses. In fact, Ares loses a lot. To Athena, to Heracles, to random mortals. He's almost too mortal, in a way. He bleeds. He suffers. He storms off when people make fun of him. He loves deeply, especially Aphrodite, whom we'll get to soon. But he also feels shame, hurt, isolation. And that makes him oddly relatable. Because who among us hasn't felt like the odd one out in a room full of people who seem to get it? While we sit there feeling too much, too loud, too wrong. Ares is the god of war, yes. But more than that, he might be the god of misunderstood emotions. Now, just to add an interesting twist, while the Greeks shunned Ares, the Romans absolutely loved his Roman counterpart, Mars. To the Romans, war was noble. It built empires. It brought glory. And so Mars was not just a god of war. He was a founding father of Rome itself, the father of Romulus and Remus, the city's mythical founders. Mars was bold, respected, patriotic. Ares, on the other hand, was basically that chaotic cousin you hope doesn't show up at the wedding. It's fascinating, isn't it? The same deity, interpreted so differently by two neighboring cultures. It tells you a lot about what a society values. The Greeks liked cleverness, restraint, control. The Romans loved conquest, discipline, expansion. And poor Ares, he just wanted someone to pick him for divine dodgeball once in a while. Despite all this rejection, Ares had his own symbols. The spear, the helmet, the vulture, and the dog. Fierce, direct, loyal, and misunderstood. The vulture, often associated with death and carnage, may seem grim, but remember, vultures are necessary. They clean the battlefield. They bring balance after the destruction. And dogs, well, dogs are war animals too, but they're also loyal, protective, emotional, which feels very Ares, doesn't it? All bark and bite, sure, but also a creature who feels everything deeply. Perhaps more than any other god, Ares was defined by feeling. That's something we rarely say about a war god. But in his case, it might be the key to understanding him. Let's return now to Olympus, not to the clang of swords, but to something softer, something warmer. Though, knowing Ares, it still carries its share of fire. Because yes, even the god of war falls in love. And not quietly, either. This is the story of Ares and Aphrodite, one of the most famous and scandalous love affairs in Greek mythology. Ares, as we've seen, was not exactly admired on Olympus. He had few friends, fewer worshippers, and a general reputation for being too much. But there was one goddess who didn't seem to mind. Her name, Aphrodite. Goddess of love, beauty, desire, and, depending on which version you read, either born from sea foam or from the divine union of primal sky and earth. She was radiant, irresistible, and married to Hephaestus. Now, if you've ever wondered how the goddess of beauty ended up married to the god of fire and forge, who walked with a limp and lived under a volcano, well, you're not alone. Hephaestus, while brilliant and kind in some stories, wasn't exactly what the poets would call dreamy. His marriage to Aphrodite wasn't really about love. It was more like an arranged Olympian alliance, a reward for his loyalty, or, in some darker tales, a move by Zeus to tether Aphrodite's power to someone less threatening. Regardless of the reason, it was a mismatched union. And Ares noticed. Where Hephaestus was slow and methodical, Ares was hot-blooded and bold. Where Hephaestus worked alone in his forge, Ares charged into battle, sweat on his brow, passion in his heart. And Aphrodite, she liked that. Their affair wasn't a one-time fling. This was ongoing, frequent, almost defiantly obvious. They met in secret, stolen kisses in the marble corridors of Olympus, whispered laughter behind silken curtains, and eventually, love, or something like it, grew between them. Ares, who had always been viewed as a brute, found in Aphrodite someone who wanted him, who didn't flinch at his intensity, who maybe even matched it, and Aphrodite. For all her power over hearts, she wasn't exactly fulfilled in her cold marriage to Hephaestus. Ares was passion personified. It made sense, even if it was dangerous. But you can only keep a secret for so long when you live in a palace made of clouds. Eventually, someone told Hephaestus. In some versions, it was the sun, god Helios, who sees everything from the sky. Others say it was a mortal rumor that made its way to Olympus. Either way, Hephaestus found out. But instead of rage, he responded with craftsmanship. You see, Hephaestus was a master of invention. So he built a trap, an invisible net finer than spider silk, but stronger than iron. He wove it with such skill that it could not be broken, not even by the strongest god, and he set it on his marriage bed. Then, pretending to leave, he waited. Ares came, as he always did, and as the lovers lay together, the net fell. They were caught, tangled, trapped, entirely exposed. And then Hephaestus summoned the gods. Yes, all of them. Zeus, Poseidon, Hermes, Apollo. Even Dionysus probably showed up with popcorn. They gathered around the bed and laughed. Immortal, echoing, merciless laughter. The god of war and the goddess of love, caught mid-embrace, unable to move. Ares was humiliated. But here's the strange part. They didn't break up. Not for good. Because whatever else you can say about Ares and Aphrodite, their connection endured. Their love wasn't just physical, it was generative. Together, they had children, many children, and each of them embodied some aspect of war, passion, or human turmoil. There was Phobos, fear, and Deimos, terror, whom we've met before. They rode with Ares into battle, spreading panic across armies. There was Harmonia, goddess of harmony and concord, a surprising contrast. She's most famous for marrying the Theban king Cadmus in a wedding attended by all the gods. But even her story ends in sorrow, thanks to a cursed necklace. It's Greek mythology. There's always a cursed necklace. There were also Eros, sometimes considered their child, the mischievous god of romantic desire, later folded into Roman mythology as Cupid, and perhaps Anteros, god of requited love, or even Adrestia, goddess of just retribution and balance in battle. Together, Ares and Aphrodite represent the strange duality of love and war, two forces that can ignite suddenly, consume completely, and leave nothing untouched. They were not peaceful, not balanced, but they fit. And here we glimpse a different Ares, the same god who howled in battle, who thirsted for blood, also fathered children, also loved a goddess of unmatched beauty, also wept when hurt. In some stories, Ares was tender, especially toward Harmonia, his daughter. When she was married, it's said he wept tears not of rage, but pride. He even appears in later myths as a protective figure, standing guard over Aphrodite and her children. Not as a conqueror, but as a partner, a father. It's a side of Ares we rarely hear about, but it's there, hidden beneath the armor, waiting. Let's go back for just a moment to that infamous bed trap. Why did the gods laugh? Was it simple mockery? Schadenfreude? Maybe. But perhaps it was discomfort. Ares and Aphrodite exposed something the other gods rarely acknowledged. Vulnerability, passion that couldn't be masked. A desire so strong it defied decorum. The gods were powerful, yes, but they were also petty, guarded, and deeply concerned with appearances. And here were two deities, completely undone. Love and war caught in the act. Open, raw, mortal almost. It was funny, but also terrifying. Because if even the gods could be ensnared by love, what hope did the rest of us have? After the net incident, Ares and Aphrodite drift in and out of each other's stories. She continues her romantic escapades, with mortals like Anchises, with other gods, and Ares returns to the battlefield, bruised pride and all. But they never truly sever ties. In art, in poetry, in the whispers of temples and myths long buried, they are linked. Sometimes they appear together in sculptures, her flowing hair and serene gaze, his muscular frame and alert eyes, beauty and war, grace and fire. Together, they are a reminder that love and violence are not so different. Both demand surrender, both can consume, and both in excess, are dangerous. It's worth noting that Aphrodite was one of the few deities who treated Ares as more than a nuisance. While other gods mocked him, dismissed him, or used him, Aphrodite saw him. Maybe not always kindly, maybe not without complication, but she saw the depth beneath the surface. And Ares, for all his flaws, he didn't try to tame her. He admired her power, her beauty, her autonomy. In a pantheon full of controlling relationships, theirs was mutual, not healthy necessarily, but real. And in that sense, theirs may be one of the more honest, divine relationships in the entire mythological record. Not perfect, but passionate, and perhaps, at times, even tender. Let's step away now from velvet sheets and whispered love, and back into the dust and clang of the battlefield. Because for all his affairs and feelings, Ares was, above all, a god of war. That was his title, his job, his identity. And yet, if you look closely at the myths, you might notice something odd. Ares, god of war, chaos, fury, rarely wins. In fact, he's defeated, a lot, by mortals, by other gods, even by his own siblings. He rushes into battle with fire in his eyes. But more often than not, he ends up limping away, humiliated and angry. This is not the victorious, flag-planting god of conquest that one might expect. No, Ares is different. He's the god of war, but not of success. Let's take a closer look. One of Ares' biggest roles in Greek myth is during the Trojan War, that 10-year drama fest that gave us Achilles, Helen, Hector, and a horse-shaped surprise. Now, to understand Ares in this context, we need to remember that most of the gods took sides in the war. Athena, Hera, and Poseidon supported the Greeks. Aphrodite, Apollo, and Ares supported the Trojans, not because of strategy, not because of honor, but, in Ares' case, because Aphrodite did. Where she went, he followed, even into a war he barely understood. And what happened? He got stabbed by a mortal. With a little divine help, of course. In Book 5 of the Iliad, we find Ares charging into the fray, roaring and raging, flinging Greek soldiers left and right. Enter Diomedes, a Greek warrior, who, with the goddess Athena at his side, manages to wound Ares with a spear. Now let's pause there. A mortal stabbing a god. That's like poking a thunderstorm and watching it cry. Ares howls, not with anger, but with actual pain. The kind of pain that echoes across mountains. The kind of pain that feels deeply unfair. He flies up to Olympus, bleeding ichor, the golden blood of the gods, and complains to Zeus, saying something like, "Look what they did to me. I was just doing my job." And Zeus, he sighs, rolls his thunderous eyes, and mutters something truly fatherly, like, "You're the worst. I never should have made you." Even in pain, Ares gets no sympathy, not from mortals, not from gods, not even from Dad. There's another story, a quieter one, where Ares is involved in something very mortal, a courtroom trial. In ancient Athens, there was a rocky outcrop near the Acropolis called the Areopagus. It was used as a place of counsel and justice. The name literally means Ares Rock. And here's why. According to myth, Ares was put on trial there for murdering Poseidon's son, Halirrhothius. The story goes like this. Halirrhothius assaulted Ares' daughter, Alcippe, and in a rare moment of divine fatherhood, Ares retaliated, swiftly and fatally. Poseidon was furious, of course, and so the gods held a trial. This was perhaps the first divine courtroom drama in myth, and the verdict, Ares was acquitted. But still, the fact that the gods even considered trying him says something. He wasn't beyond judgment. He wasn't untouchable. He was feared, yes, but not trusted. And the location of his trial, the Areopagus, became a symbol of justice, irony wrapped in stone. A place named for war, where law ruled instead. Ares is also deeply connected to the Amazons, the fierce warrior women who lived apart from men and fought with unmatched skill. In some myths, Ares is said to be the father of the Amazons, either literally or symbolically. He represents their battle spirit, unyielding, raw, passionate. Many of his daughters are named in stories: Penthesilea, Hippolyta, Antiope. Each one a queen, a warrior, a legend. Penthesilea, in particular, stands out. She joined the Trojan War on the side of the Trojans, Ares' side, and faced off against Achilles himself. She fought bravely and died. Achilles, after killing her, reportedly felt sorrow, because in her he saw something noble, something tragic, and perhaps that's the closest thing to a win Ares ever gets, inspiring fearsome, flawed mortals who fight for something real. And then there's Heracles. In myth, Ares and Heracles clash more than once, and almost every time, Heracles wins. In one tale, Heracles slays Ares' son, Cycnus, who had been attacking travelers. Ares, enraged, confronts Heracles in battle, divine wrath incarnate. But Heracles stands firm. He defeats Ares, wounds him, and sends him fleeing back to Olympus. Again. It's a theme, isn't it? Ares charges in, full of fire, and comes out the other side, wounded, humbled, rejected. You begin to wonder, why does he keep fighting? Ares is not a god of victory. He's not a god of strategy. He is a god of instinct, of that flash of emotion before thought takes over. The chaos, the heartbreak, the impulse. He is war without a plan. And while that may not be something the Greeks wanted to honor, it was something they had to acknowledge. Because humans are not always logical. We do not always fight noble battles. Sometimes we rage because we don't know what else to do. And in those moments, we are closest to Ares. He is the tantrum, the scream, the punch you regret, the storm that breaks without warning. He is loss as much as he is battle. And strangely, he might be the most honest god of them all. It's tempting to laugh at Ares, the god who keeps losing, who storms off in tears, who gets caught, mocked, ignored. But what if that's the point? What if Ares isn't about victory, but about struggle? His myths show us something rare in divine storytelling: failure. Repeated, public, humiliating failure. And that's powerful, because we too fail, often, loudly, quietly, embarrassingly. And unlike Athena with her perfect plans, or Apollo with his shining light, Ares stumbles. He's the god who bleeds, and in that, we see ourselves. So far, we've watched Ares rush into battle and passion alike. We've seen him mocked, wounded, feared, and occasionally pitied. He's fought mortals, lost to heroes, and tangled in divine gossip that would make even a modern reality show producer blush. But what happened after? What happened to Ares when the myths grew quiet? When the temples faded and the stories shifted? Did he vanish into the fog of forgotten gods? Not quite. Because Ares, despite everything, has a strange legacy. One that stretches from ancient altars to modern screens, shifting shape as he moves. Let's trace his afterlife, shall we? Let's begin with the Romans. Now, you might think they'd view Ares just like the Greeks did, loud, violent, and generally unpleasant. But Rome saw potential. They rebranded him, gave him a new name, Mars. And with that name came a whole new identity. Mars wasn't just the god of war. He was the god of Rome, of victory, discipline, honor, and order. He wasn't a tantrum, he was a commander. Where Ares was chaos, Mars was control. Still a warrior, yes, but now one with purpose, with civic importance, with temples and festivals and statues built in his image. Mars became the father of the Roman people, literally. According to myth, he was the father of Romulus and Remus, the twin brothers who founded Rome. This made him not just a military figure, but a patriarch. He had pride, he had power, he was respected, which raises a curious question. How did the same basic deity, a war god, get such radically different receptions? The answer lies in culture. The Greeks, for all their glory, were skeptical of brute strength. They liked cleverness, strategy, elegance. Even their greatest heroes, like Odysseus and Athena, won through intellect. Violence to the Greeks was sometimes necessary, but never admirable on its own. That's why Ares was distrusted. He represented what they feared in themselves, unthinking passion. The part of war that made you lose control. But the Romans loved control. They saw war as a tool for peace, a means to civilize, to expand. And so Mars became a hero, a protector, the ideal Roman man, brave, stoic, disciplined. Same god, different spin. Ares sulked, Mars stood tall. And from this divide, Ares slipped into the shadows, for a time. Though his temples fell silent, Ares never truly vanished. Like many gods, he became an archetype, a symbol in art, in literature, and in the stories we told ourselves about war. In medieval texts, echoes of Ares appear in tales of berserker warriors and cursed swords. He looms in Shakespeare's blood-soaked tragedies. His spirit pulses in the battlefield scenes of war and peace, and the rousing cries of Braveheart. But always, Ares is the warning. He's not the wise general. He's the spark of destruction, the soldier who breaks rank, the fury that turns a noble cause into a vendetta, the god who reminds us that war is never clean. Fast forward to modern times, and Ares returns, not as a temple statue, but as a character, a trope, a force. Let's take a look at some of his most famous modern incarnations. In the Wonder Woman universe, Ares is often the main villain, the literal god of war, manipulating humanity into endless conflict. He's charming, he's clever, but at his core, he still believes humans are doomed to destroy themselves. He's the cynic behind the curtain, whispering to generals and stirring dissent. And yet, there's always something tragic about him. Ares, as portrayed in these stories, isn't just evil. He's tired, exhausted by millennia of war, convinced that peace is a fantasy. He wants destruction, but maybe because he doesn't know what else to believe in. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? In the original God of War game, Ares is the main antagonist, the one who tricks the protagonist, Kratos, into committing atrocities. He's huge, cruel, and terrifying. But here too, his downfall is not just violence, it's arrogance. He underestimates what rage can become when turned against its creator. Ares is eventually slain by Kratos, who replaces him as the new god of war. It's a poetic cycle. War devouring war, rage begetting more rage. And yet, even here, Ares lingers, as memory, as warning. In Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson series, Ares is a leather-clad biker god, aggressive, swaggering, and full of attitude. He's not elegant, he's not noble, but he's also not completely evil. He represents a very specific flavor of war, reckless courage, bullying, bravado. He's a teenage vision of the god, a walking bad decision with a motorcycle. And it works, because even here, Aries teaches something, that strength without wisdom is dangerous, that bravado is not bravery, that there's more to being a warrior than just swinging a sword. But perhaps the most powerful legacy of Aries isn't in comics or games or marble ruins. It's in us, because Aries, more than any other god, is a mirror, not to our higher selves, but to the parts we don't always understand, our anger, our heartbreak, our grief that turns into fury. When we lash out because we're scared, Aries is there. When we argue not to win, but because we don't know how to be silent, Aries is there. When we lose control, when we say something cruel, when we feel ashamed afterward, that is Aries. He is not the hero. He is the response, the raw nerve, the bruised ego, the flame behind the eyes. And in understanding him, we might understand ourselves just a little more kindly. Here's a question worth asking, softly, as we near the end. Was Aries ever evil? Or was he simply honest about what war really looks like? He didn't dress it up with strategy or justice. He didn't pretend war was glorious. He showed us the blood, the crying, the loss, the screaming, and the stumbling, and the rage that has nowhere to go. He didn't lie. And maybe that's why the Greeks couldn't bear him, because he told the truth about them and about us. And truth, unfiltered, is rarely easy to love. Ares never had many temples in the ancient world. He wasn't widely worshipped, but the places where his presence was strongest, like Sparta or certain war-torn regions, reveals something interesting. People prayed to Ares, not because they adored him, but because they needed him, in the moment before battle, in the silence after a fight. They invoked his name because they didn't want to feel alone in their fear. And even now, we invoke him, in poetry, in protest, in the quiet scream inside our chest. We don't build temples to Ares anymore. But sometimes, in the middle of a hard moment, we feel him, and that may be the truest worship of all. And now, we've come to the end. The battlefield is quiet. The armor lies still. The sword has been set gently aside, and Ares, that most misunderstood of gods, recedes back into the mist. We've walked with him through myth and legend, through blood and laughter, through heartbreak and fury. We've seen him not just as the god of war, but as something far more fragile, the god of feeling too much, of reacting too quickly, of being too loud in a room that prefers silence. We saw the child of Olympus, unloved and underestimated. We saw the lover, tangled with Aphrodite, caught in passion and embarrassment in equal measure. We saw the warrior, wounded again and again, by mortals, by siblings, by the world itself. And finally, we saw the symbol, the archetype, the reminder of what it means to be human in all our glorious mess. Ares isn't clean, he isn't noble, he isn't kind, but maybe he doesn't need to be. Maybe Ares exists to show us the parts of ourselves that aren't tidy, the parts that burst out when we're hurting, the parts that get us into trouble, and the parts that survive anyway. Because that's the quiet truth beneath the rage. Ares always came back, from defeat, from shame, from being laughed at and pushed aside. He came back, every time. And maybe, just maybe, that's his true divinity. Not strength, not strategy, but resilience. So if you've ever felt too much, if you've ever reacted too quickly, if you've ever sat in the quiet after a storm, wondering what just happened, you've walked in Ares' shadow. And now, as sleep reaches for you, soft and slow, maybe you can let those feelings settle. Let the battlefield within you grow still. There's nothing more to fight for tonight, just stars above Olympus, and a god of war who finally rests. thank you for spending this time with me and with Aries. If you enjoyed this journey through myth and emotion, don't forget to gently like the video, leave a comment sharing your favorite Aries moment, or let me know which god or monster you'd like to meet next. Until then, sleep well, warrior, and may your dreams be softer than the heart of a god who was never meant to win, but fought anyway. Good night.